Welcome back to the channel. In this particular video, I want to discuss NVDA a little bit here and explain why I believe that over the coming weeks, we're going to see way lower levels in NVIDIA. And a lot of it has to do with the earnings that we saw the prior week. So to catch everybody up to date, we've had this down draw in the market for the previous few weeks. We came from the highs end of October. We bottomed last week so far. As you guys can see, we've had a few days trading higher. We're still up about 40 basis points today. NVIDIA's, followed the path to an extent, right? We've kind of traded lower since then. We bottomed. Yesterday we put a bottoming candle, and we're struggling a little bit today. But let's pay attention to this candle right here, this really big one. This is the one the day after earnings. I'm gonna bring this up a little bit more. And let's look at the 5-minute chart here. Okay. So on that day, earnings comes out in the aftermarket, right? The earnings were phenomenal across the board. They beat estimates, plus they guided higher. Everything looked great. And it actually pushed the markets up way higher overnight in the futures market. And NVIDIA itself traded higher, as we could see. The light gray here represents the aftermarket and pre-market session. Now, once the cash session actually opens up, at 9:30 a.m., we begin to sell down, and we end up reversing the whole overnight move that came on the back of very positive earnings. Over the subsequent days, as you can see here, NVIDIA traded along this 180 mark. Traded lower yesterday, hitting about 170, traded higher, came back to 180, poking through, but once again, trading below 180 as I make this video, even though as you look on the left hand side here, NASDAQ is up 30 basis points right now. So here's the thing. NVIDIA is the largest public company out there. It takes the most amount of weight in the SPX. It has the most amount of weight in NASDAQ. It's a massive company, and it's obviously also the leader in AI. And AI has been a massive driver for the markets for this year and even last year and so forth. The fact that the largest leader of AI is struggling this much, and it is struggling because if it's selling off on poor earnings, that's not a great sign. Normally speaking, when a stock is in a very bullish trend, it will manage to shake off negative news because investors are that optimistic about the stock that they're willing to look past anything that's temporarily negative. But in this case, there was nothing that you can nitpick about the earnings, but the stock managed to trade under. So again, if we look at this chart here, right? Let's zoom out a bit more. Earnings again here, we trade all the way back to 180. We've broken under, and we're essentially trading under it right now. Even though if you look on the right hand side here, this is the SPX. Right, bottoming. I mean, we've recovered a good portion of the drop here already, right? NASDAQ doesn't look as nice, but still, you can see the recovery there. And NVIDIA paints a very different story. Now, as a disclaimer, I am short a whole bunch of NVIDIA shares right here at 180. And I also opened up some additional puts expiring about 2 weeks from now on NVIDIA about 15 minutes ago, which is in part as to why I decided to make this video. So how do you manage risk on this particular trade? Well, what I'm personally looking for is if price can start closing above where it closed before earnings, I would say, okay, NVIDIA's, it's back on the train. Maybe there's a small little hiccup here. Maybe money's gonna start flowing back to it. That's what I'm personally using as a marker. So about 187 or so as my stop in NVIDIA. In terms of taking profits, that's a little bit more difficult. That is a bit more touch and go. It depends what the overall market is doing. We're still at a spot here where is this going back to all-time highs, or is this simply, as people like to say, dead cat bounce? It's hard to tell so far. Obviously, that will have an influence as to how NVIDIA behaves. I also just want to say that if you are looking to short the markets, if you are bearish the markets, you might as well short something that is being weak in this rebound, and NVIDIA basically, it's the perfect representation of that. It is being weak during this rebound. I mean, why would you want to go, for example, and short something like Google where not only has it essentially had very minimum drawdown in the last 2 weeks, it's managed to recover so quickly, and it's hit all-time highs yesterday, right? This is not a spot where you'd want to be chasing a short position on a stock that is this strong. You want to be doing it with a stock that is weak, right? So maybe even something like AMD, for example, rebounding a little bit, but as you can see, it's struggling, right? I'm just laser focused on NVDA here, only because it did have earnings and it failed to rally off the back of those earnings. So you have to ask yourself at this point, okay, if those earnings were not enough to rally the stock in that environment, and now keep in mind the stock also had pulled back already a little bit, so it had some room to breathe higher. But if the stock struggled to move higher on the back of those earnings, even though it's already pulled off a few percentages from its all-time highs, well, what can move it higher, right? That's the question to be asking yourself. But that is my thesis on NVIDIA, and like I said, I'm holding short positions on the stock and puts. I'll try to update them in the comments over the subsequent weeks. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Catch you next time.